Today, in Real Life Archives, the man who sold the Taj Mahal.
All right, imagine waking up tomorrow and reading the headline that someone just bought the Taj Mahal. You'd probably think it was a satirical article or some kind of bizarre internet prank, right? Well, today, in this explainer, we are diving deep into a history that completely defies logic. We're looking at the story of a man who actually pulled this off, not just once, but repeatedly. We are talking about a true architect of deceit, someone with the unbelievable nerve to construct a totally impossible reality and convince powerful people to buy into it. Let's take our time unpacking this fascinating and frankly deeply unsettling history and explore exactly how a single human mind managed to achieve the absolute impossible.
So really think about this for a second. How do you sell a national monument? I want you to let the absolute absurdity of that premise sink in. If a guy in a suit approached you today and offered to sell you the Eiffel Tower or, I don't know, the Statue of Liberty, you wouldn't just politely decline the offer, you would literally laugh in his face. It's an insane proposition. Yet, this actually happened in real life, over and over again. To understand how such a massive, reality-bending suspension of disbelief even occurs, we really have to unravel a profound mystery of human psychology.
Let's start by looking at Part 1, the architect of deceit and the origins of an illusionist.
So, our story begins with a man named Mithilesh Kumar Srivastava, born back in 1912 in a rural village in Bihar, India. Honestly, looking at his early life, there were absolutely no hints of the wild international notoriety that was waiting for him. But beneath that ordinary, everyday surface, he harbored this terrifying, almost obsessive talent for perfectly replicating signatures. And I mean perfectly. He would study the stroke, the rhythm, the exact pressure of the pen on the paper, until his forgeries were completely indistinguishable from the real thing. But here's the catch. A forged signature is basically just a parlor trick if you don't have the context to weaponize it. And that's where his education comes in. By studying law, he essentially learned the language of power. This legal background gave him the ultimate blueprint of the system. He learned exactly how official contracts are structured. He absorbed the incredibly dense phrasing used by government entities. And he mastered the intricate mechanics of bureaucratic legitimacy. He figured out exactly what makes a piece of paper look utterly unquestionable to the human eye.
Which brings us right into Part 2, forging the language of power and the mechanics of belief. Operating under his now infamous alias, Natwarlal, he took forgery and elevated it into an absolute art form. He moved way beyond simple fraud and waded deep into the realm of profound psychological manipulation. You see, he understood that legitimacy isn't just a legal status, it's a psychological construct, and he knew exactly how to trigger it using physical meticulousness. First off, he used artificially aged paper. This was brilliant because it instantly gave his fake documents a subconscious sense of history and permanence. Second, the official stamps he replicated were just obsessively detailed. But his true stroke of dark genius? That was something called flawed perfection. He realized that if a document looks too pristine, it actually triggers a subtle alarm in the human brain. We are wired to suspect absolute perfection. So what did he do? He would deliberately include a slight smudge of ink or maybe a perfectly placed minor administrative typo. It was a calculated human error that made the illusion undeniably, authentically real.
And you have to understand, every single scam he ran was at its core a full-blown theatrical production. The documents? Those were merely props. He didn't just walk up, hand over a fake deed, and run away with the cash. No, he staged an elaborate, fully immersive illusion. He would dress impeccably, completely transforming himself into a high-ranking government official. He commanded this authoritative, highly technical jargon that intimidated his victims, these wealthy, successful people, into silence and compliance. Nobody wants to look dumb, right? He even deployed accomplices who acted as his aides, his assistants, his secretaries. He basically created this unbreakable, 360-degree bubble of sheer power around him.
Now let's look at Part 3, selling the Taj Mahal and executing the impossible. So how in the world do you convince wealthy, ambitious, highly educated investors that they can actually purchase the Taj Mahal? Well, you have to build a custom reality for them, and Natwarlal built his on 4 very specific pillars. First up, exclusivity. He made his victims feel incredibly special. He'd lean in and whisper about secret government concessions that were strictly off-limits to the general public. Second was complexity. He buried these guys in so much complicated legal jargon about permits and internal bureaucratic processes that it became too hard to untangle. They just had to trust him. Third, urgency. He manufactured this intense artificial pressure, insisting they had to close the deal right then and there.
which brilliantly cut off their time to fact-check anything. And finally, the fourth and undeniably most powerful tool of the whole operation, visual validation.
Physical proximity creates truth. Just imagine the scene for a moment. He didn't meet these high-rolling investors in some dark alley or a generic, boring hotel conference room. Oh no, he took them on a physical, guided tour of the Taj Mahal itself. He walked them right up to the monument, casually gesturing to its massive, iconic domes, while discussing the terms of the multi-million-dollar sale with absolute, unwavering confidence. And the human brain makes a very dangerous logical leap here. We think, well, if I am standing right here, touching the marble, and this high-ranking official is personally showing it to me, this simply must be real. He used the sheer, undeniable physical presence of one of the world's wonders as the ultimate anchor for his illusion.
And the craziest part? His ambitions didn't even stop at the Taj Mahal, he escalated. He reportedly sold the massive Red Fort in Delhi and, astonishingly, the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which is literally the official residence of the President of India. Now, why target these seemingly impossible, imposing national symbols? Because it proves that his ultimate motive wasn't really just about the financial gain. Sure, the money was nice, but it was about the intellectual thrill of achieving the impossible. For him, the more absurd and audacious the con, the greater the intellectual high.
Let's transition to part 4, the myth and the escapes, and see how folklore compares to reality. You know, whenever crimes reach this kind of legendary magnitude, society naturally steps in to fill the gaps with folklore. Over the years, the myth painted Natwarlal as this romanticized Robin Hood figure, a guy stealing from the ultra-rich to distribute wealth back in his native village, a cinematic master of infinite disguises. It sounds great, like a movie, but the stark, unadorned reality of who he was is actually far more dangerous and honestly more fascinating. He wasn't some vigilante action hero. He was, for all intents and purposes, a bureaucratic hacker. He was a deeply manipulative persuader, and it is absolutely vital to point out that he never used physical violence, not once. His only weapon was the human mind, and his terrifying ability to completely hijack it using words alone.
This staggering scale of his operations is almost hard to fathom today. We are talking about over 100 legal cases filed against him throughout his life. Over 100! Yet time and time again, he constantly slipped through the cracks. He actively exploited a judicial system that was deeply flawed, often corrupt, and bogged down by massive jurisdictional inefficiencies. He proved that when a bureaucracy becomes highly complex and fragmented, a man who knows how to speak its language perfectly can just walk right through its walls without ever breaking a single lock.
And perhaps the most chilling, cinematic example of his absolute power of persuasion was his final escape. Listen to this. He didn't break out of a maximum security prison using brute force or smuggled tools or explosives. No. By this time, he was an elderly man, in very advanced age, restricted to a wheelchair, being transported by police custody at a crowded train station in New Delhi. And he simply vanished. Actually, let's be accurate. He didn't just vanish. He achieved this incredible escape quietly, calmly manipulating the minds of the very armed guards who were legally sworn to watch him. He quite literally talked his way into thin air.
So, officially, government records state that Natwarlal died in the year 2009. But, as with everything in his life, even his death is shrouded in this haunting ambiguity. His own lawyer claimed he had died years earlier, while other enduring rumors suggest he simply faked his own demise one last time to disappear completely and peacefully. And you know what? Given his entire lifetime of engineering flawless, airtight illusions, it's a theory that feels entirely uncomfortably plausible. It would be the ultimate magic trick.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, Exploiting the Human Mind and the Anatomy of Vulnerability.
To truly grasp the weight of this explainer, we really need to strip away the fun romance of the master con man trope, because the harsh truth is, Natwarlal didn't exploit monuments, he exploited us. He weaponized some very uncomfortable truths about human nature. He used our deep biological wiring to instantly trust a confident, authoritative voice in a sharp suit holding a stamped piece of paper. He leveraged the blind ambition and greed that completely clouds our critical judgment the second we're presented with a supposedly exceptional deal. And he utilized the incredibly fragmented bureaucratic systems that are supposedly designed to protect us. He showed us that when these systems get overly complex, they actually become the very tools used to dismantle our security.
At the end of the day, the true asset he manipulated was human trust. He didn't sell stone buildings or marble domes, he sold belief. And by perfectly capturing that belief, he made the absolute impossible seem entirely logically rational. Which leaves us with one final, incredibly unsettling question. If a man armed with nothing more than a few sheets of artificially aged paper and a confident stride can literally sell a national monument, how easily could your own reality be hacked by a master illusionist? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning what you see out there, and as always, stay curious.
This is just one story. There are many more you wouldn't believe. Subscribe for the next one.